Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Liverpool podcast, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. It's Wildcard Wednesday across the Global Sports Podcast Network, and we are looking ahead to tonight's Champions League tie against PSV. So in today's episode, we're going to take a look at PSV, their history, what kind of club they are, as well as their recent form guide, what kind of threats they'll pose to Liverpool. We'll also take a look at the latest form guide and team news for the Reds, as well as doing a predicted team lineup, and maybe, if I'm feeling brave enough, a score prediction. Right, so PSV, who are they? Dutch club. Start with the obvious. Formed in 1913, and PSV stands for, and I'm not going to even attempt the Dutch pronunciation. So in English, it translates as the Philips Sports Association, and was formed for the Philips employees. I mean, I genuinely did not know that. They play at the Philips Stadium, so yeah, that makes sense. But it's funny, I've never once in all my life thought, I wonder what PSV stands for. It's so weird. I don't know if it's because it's a foreign club. You know, for me, it's just PSV. Whereas an English club like QPR, it's Queen's Park Rangers. We all know that. Anyway, so PSV, I'll never quite look at the club in quite the same way now. I just see a Philips TV in my mind now. PSV, they're part of the Dutch Big Three in the Eredivisie, along with Ajax. Ajax have got 36 Dutch titles to their name, PSV with 24, and the other big team being Feyenoord, Arne Slot's former team. So they have a pedigree, certainly in Holland, but what about Europe? Well, they won the Champions League when it was the European Cup back then, but they were winners back in 1988. They were managed by none other than Gus Hiddink, a man that Chelsea fans know all too well. They've had some big players turn out for them. Ruud Gullit went on to huge success at AC Milan. Ronald Koeman went on to win the European Cup with Barcelona. Actually, I found out of quite an amusing story about Ronald Koeman, PSV. Ronald Koeman was actually banned by UEFA and missed the second leg of the semi-final in the year that they won the competition. And he was banned because he praised a really bad foul that one of the PSV players had committed on Jean Tigana in the previous round. I just find that a really amusing anecdote. It's kind of very Roy Keane. But PSV have developed a reputation for unearthing, really, really good raw talent. Romario, legendary Brazilian striker Romario, went on to play for Barcelona. He won the World Cup with Brazil in 1994 in America. He made his mark at PSV. They signed a 17-year-old Ronaldo. Not that one, the real one, the original Ronaldo. He also left for Barcelona, went on to win the World Cup again with Brazil, and all manner of trophies with Real Madrid, played for Barcelona as well, as I mentioned. So they do have a history, a storied one, a history of developing young players, and they are the current Dutch champions. So their current form, they're top of the Dutch league, 49 points from 20 games. Their recent league form a bit patchy. They've won 3, drawn 1, and lost 2 from their last 6 games, scoring 15 goals and conceding 9. So they do concede goals, which I think, gives Liverpool much to be confident about. And in the Champions League this season, from the last 5 games, they have won 3, drawn 1, and lost 1. So they are on 11 points in 19th place in that new format Champions League table. So they have a lot to play for in this game, and they've got a huge opportunities to secure a playoff spot for the knockout stages. So the incentive is definitely there for PSV to really have a go at Liverpool. And I think that if Liverpool show up with anything less than a 100% attitude, this could be one of those nights where, the big team can get tripped up. All right, time for a short break. And when we come back, we'll go through some Liverpool team news and a predicted lineup. Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. Okay, welcome back. Let's do a predicted lineup. Let's start off with the goalkeeping position. Obviously, Alisson Becker is the preferred number one. He's come back from injury, and so, Premier League and Champions League games tend to be the ones that he plays, although Slot did pull a surprise where he played Alisson in that first leg League Cup semi-final against Spurs, where, it has been kind of recent practice where the Liverpool manager will play Kelleher in the domestic cup games. But I think it just goes to show that Slot, he doesn't really go for that kind of thing. I think he's quite ruthless. If a game is considered to be a really, really important game and a game that is, one step towards winning silverware, he tends to pick his big players, his best players. And so I think that there's a temptation to play Kelleher, to protect Alisson, because he does get injured. He does have one or two injuries a season, maybe, or I should say one big injury a season. I suppose Slot is hoping that injury has come and gone. He's done his one big injury for the season. But we do have some big games coming up this month. We've got Bournemouth at the weekend, which, who thought that would have been a really massive game at the start of the season? But, Bournemouth are absolutely flying, and they are one of the in-form teams. And so travelling to Bournemouth at the weekend, has become a much bigger game for Liverpool than maybe we thought it would, a month ago or 6 weeks ago. Then we've got the Merseyside derby. We've got an FA Cup game. We've got Spurs in the second leg of that League Cup semi-final. We've got Manchester City away and Newcastle at home. So not just a packed schedule in terms of the number of games that we're playing, but the magnitude of these games, the intensity of these games. Merseyside derby, Manchester City, these are big games. And so do we risk Alisson in a game and a competition that is effectively sewn up in terms of qualification for that knockout stage? I would hope that he rests Alisson and plays Kelleher, but I've just got a feeling that Slot is going to, play his big guns. He'll play Alisson. I think as a goalkeeper, I think that you're probably less concerned about getting tired and fatigue, just the nature of the position, and especially for someone like Alisson, where Liverpool are going to control a bulk of the possession. He's not really going to have that much to do. And so I guess it's not fatigue that Slot will be worried about when it comes to his goalkeeper. It's more about the keeper just being on top of his game, having that rhythm that he can develop game in, game out. And so I think that whilst I would like to see Kelleher play, but I think that's more of a fear-based fan decision. that I just don't want Alisson to get injured. Whereas I don't think managers think that way. And I think Slot will be that way. I don't think he'll think, oh, I don't want to play Alisson just in case he gets injured. He's got to play because he's just got to keep his rhythm. So I think Alisson will start. In terms of the back four, Connor Bradley's now back to full fitness. And I think that's a real big plus for Liverpool. I think he'll get a run out and he'll start to keep Trent fresh. He's playing a lot recently, and so I think he'll want to rotate that position and get minutes under Bradley's belt. And apart from anything else, having that healthy competition for that right back spot, I think just makes Liverpool just so much stronger. We've got Trent Alexander-Arnold who, gives us things that just no other right can offer. His delivery, his eye for a pass. And I know that his defensive skills are always questioned, but, we've got Connor Bradley who covers that side of things, and his intensity, the way that he gets up and down that right flank, is a real plus to have both of those players fit and firing. So, but I think that Slot will play Connor Bradley because I do think that Trent will probably play at the weekend against Bournemouth. In terms of the other fullback role, Andy Robertson did play against Ipswich at the weekend, and he played pretty well, and it was really good to see. I know it's Ipswich. No, they're not the best team in the league by any stretch, but I thought that Robertson, played well, and whatever came his way, he dealt with it in the way that we've become accustomed to with Andy Robertson over the seasons. So I think it was good for his confidence to get that game under his belt. But I think that Tsimikas will start on Wednesday night, again, just to get that rotation going with the games coming thick and fast. And we just don't want to overload these players. And you see that with other teams. You see that with Spurs. So many players out injured. And I think that that's partly down to the manager and knowing his players. And I think that's one of the real big strengths of Arne Slot this season is the way that he's rotated his players. He doesn't tend to make wholesale changes. You'll rarely see a Liverpool team change with kind of 3 or 4 players coming in and out after every game. It tends to be just 1 or 2. But over the course of a block of fixtures, he's changing 1 or 2 players in different areas. And so they are being rotated, but I think in a quite a kind of conservative way. Is that the right word? But it's very methodical. And I think it's been borne out by the lack of injuries that we have suffered. We have suffered injuries. Alisson has been injured. Trent has been out. Konate has been out. We have had injuries, but I think we've managed them better this season than we have in seasons gone by. So in terms of the fullbacks then, so we're looking at Connor Bradley and Kostas Tsimikas. The centre-back positions, I think, is a tricky one because I think that Kwanzaa, I should say, I think he should start and I think he will start. And you do need to rest one of the other 2 first-choice defenders, Ibrahima Konate and obviously Virgil van Dijk. But, which one do you rest? Konate is only recently from a long-term absence. So, do you push him with a midweek fixture, bearing in mind that he played on Saturday and then we've got games coming up? But then the skipper is so important. I would rest Van Dijk, but I've got a feeling that Slot will play Van Dijk. I think that experience next to Kwanzaa, keeping the rhythm again in those legs, I think swings it towards a Van Dijk start. Midfield, a couple of changes there. Curtis Jones is unavailable through injury, which hopefully for me means that Harvey Elliott gets a start. I really think he needs game time. He's been coming on for, substitute appearances here and there. And I think this is a perfect opportunity for Slot to give him those minutes. And it's not a drop-off in quality. Harvey Elliott is a really good player, but I just think that he just needs game time. I think Gravenberch and McAllister do start. But here's another spanner in the works, actually, or something for Slot to consider, because it is, I think, quite significant, bearing in mind that we are coming towards the knockout stages of the Champions League. And that is that both McAllister and Ibrahima Konate are one yellow card away from a suspension in the Champions League. And yellow cards are not wiped out again until the completion of the quarterfinals. So, it could be said that you'd rather have a player suspended for the first leg than the second leg. So there is something there to consider for Arne Slot. And I think the McAllister is the one that's in danger, because, he is such a terrier in that midfield that he does tend to pick up these yellow cards. But, do you want to do it now or do you do it later? It's just such a difficult one. But I think that is something that may be a consideration for Slot. But I do think that Gravenberch and McAllister start, and I hope that Harvey Elliott starts. Possibly Endo maybe coming on in the second half, I think, for maybe someone like McAllister, or to at least give one of those two a rest ahead of the weekend's game against Bournemouth. Moving on to the forward line, I think that could be really interesting, because, again, here's another player that I really hope that Arne Slot gives a start to, and that is Federico Chiesa, to give him a start on that right wing. I think he's shown over the last few appearances that he's getting stronger. He's been involved with goals and assists, but he desperately needs a start. And if it's not a full 90 minutes, then, a good 60, 70 minutes. I really don't want to see him coming on for the last, 10 or 15 minutes. Give him a start and, give him a 90 minutes, or at the very least 60 minutes. Yeah, Mo's not going to be happy, because the man is obsessed with playing every single game and scoring every game, which, look, you can't knock. You can't knock him for that. You can't knock any footballer for that, because it's great for us. He always shows up. He's always available, and it just makes him just the ultimate professional and a player that, Arne Slot can rely on week in, week out, with not just his performances, but just his availability, which is half the job. But I do think that as we approach, the business end of the season, we do need all our forwards fit and ready to go. So I do hope that he starts with Chiesa. And another player I'd like to see start is Darwin Núñez, because he didn't at the weekend, which I've got to say I was slightly surprised with after his match-winning performance against Brentford. He's had decent moments recently, none more so than obviously the one that I've just mentioned, that important brace against Brentford. But let's get him back in the starting lineup and get some goals against the PSV defence. That it does give up chances, it does leak. So I really hope that Núñez gets a chance to start as well. And does Slot give Diaz a run out on the left, or Cody Gakpo? Because Gakpo will be returning to his former club. He played 159 games for PSV, scoring 55 goals and winning the Dutch Cup twice. So he's got good memories of PSV. Arne Slot doesn't strike me as being sentimental. I don't think that he's swayed by that kind of thing. He's going back to his homeland as well. But I think that Gakpo would still be my choice for that left wing spot. I just think that he's just come on so so well under Slot, and I think he's just a vital part of that front line. And I think if Darwin Núñez plays, I think Gakpo would be a really, really good option. Just the way that he cuts in and fires in those crosses, I think that could be quite fruitful for Darwin Núñez. So hopefully, I think Gakpo gets a run out. In terms of the actual game itself, I think it could be a bit closer than we think. It could be one of those European nights where it's quite tactical. But because PSV, I think, have got a lot to play for, I'm expecting them to be really fired up, and that crowd to be really, really backing the team, because they've got a fantastic opportunity to seal a knockout spot in the Champions League. And if they win, they're certainly through. And I think if they draw, they've probably got a good chance of going through, obviously dependent on other results. But I'm still backing the Reds. I think obviously we're just going to have too much quality. So I think if we do turn up, and obviously if we do take our chances, I'm going for fingers crossed, a routine 2-0 win. Okay, time for another short break, and we'll be back right after this. This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football, and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network. Every club, every day. Okay, just before we close off today, huge transfer news. The news is that there is none. It looks like, according to Jamie Carragher and David Ornstein, who's well versed in all matters transfers, it looks like Liverpool will not be making any signings this January window. Huge surprise there for all Liverpool fans out there listening. I don't think really we got our hopes up too high, particularly when you hear that your sporting director is off on a 2-week holiday. So it doesn't suggest that there's going to be much activity. I mean, there were rumours at the weekend that Ajax defender Jero Hato was at Anfield at the weekend, and indeed it turns out that he was, apparently as a guest of Ryan Gravenberch, and you can imagine that set all the kind of Liverpool social media accounts in a spin. I think he's a really good prospect. He's young, he's 18 years old. I think he's perfect in terms of fitting that FSG Liverpool model in terms of the kinds of players that we look to sign. But, whether he comes this window, I just think it looks unlikely now. I know that we've been linked with Kirkes as well at Bournemouth, who I think is a fantastic player. He's 23-year-old, and I think he ticks all the boxes for us. And then there's Robinson at Fulham, who, whilst I do rate him, I think he's really good. I just don't think that Liverpool are going to invest in a 27, 28-year-old in terms of future-proofing that left-back slot. So, let's see. I mean, both Ornstein and Carragher have suggested that Arnie's slot will be sitting on a huge war chest come the summer. We shall see. I don't think any Liverpool fan is convinced that FSG give their managers a huge war chest. But you know what? I'll be absolutely delighted if I'm wrong. But that is all for today. Give us a follow on your preferred podcast platform so that you get the very latest content when it drops. Follow us on social media at GSPN Liverpool. You can email us at gspndailyliverpool@gmail.com. Join us again tomorrow for our post-match review of that game against PSV in the Champions League. Until next time, thank you for listening.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.